Okay, here we go. Hello there, everybody. I want to thank Isaac for the raid. That's 4 more people than I've ever had on a stream before. Actually, it's 5 more people than I ever had on a stream before, because this is the first time I have ever streamed anything. I hope everybody can hear me. If you can, just give me a quick nod in the chat. Just want to make sure everything is working. I guess you can hear me. Okay, so let's get started. First thing I wanted to do was actually take a quick look at how much work everybody else has been getting done, because it's pretty amazing. There have been a lot of entries in a lot of prompts. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see that people have been busy for the first couple of days. Okay, I'm very low. Is that any better? Or am I going to have to play with the gain on the mic? So, like I said, everybody has been very busy. Let me see. Can I up the gain on my mic? I should be able to. No, that's as high as that goes. Can I cheat that here? No? Okay. This is going to have to do. I hope people can hear me. So let's really get into this. The first thing I wanted to talk about real quick was the things that I did to get started for summer camp. And the first thing I did was, of course, came to the summer camp homepage here. It has all the prompts. And just so that I don't lose track of what I've done and what I haven't done, the first thing I did was actually went through and clicked on every one of these right prompt buttons. And what that did, of course, was brought up each of the articles one at a time, and I just kind of put a couple of quick placeholder bits in them so that they'd be here in World Anvil for me for the duration. And the first thing I did, you'll notice, is that I tagged every one of them with summer camp, so that I can zero in on all of these. The other thing I did, and I have this ready for a quick review, is I put them all at the top of my to-do list. All right, and a few of them you'll notice I've already put in some ideas for what I'm going to do. Some of them I have no idea yet, like repurposed building or induced condition. I got one done yesterday. I got my celestial body done yesterday, so that's out there already. And I had one other very interesting situation that I had to do something special for. My religious leader, I'm working on a role-playing game world setting, and I've actually started working on this a little while. In fact, a little while before I discovered World Anvil, and I have a couple. I actually have three groups of playtesters that are playing through the first adventure module in the first area that I'm concentrating on. And one of those players is going to have some long-term interactions with the. I haven't actually put any documentation or text behind her yet, but the leader that I'm using for summer camp for my religious leader is somebody, like I said, that's going to be interacting significantly with one of my playtesters. Well, my playtesters are all following my world on World Anvil, and I don't want them reading all about the details of this world leader yet, especially not the player that's going to be involved with her, because there's going to be a lot of discovery on his part as things go along. So what I actually did was created a second world. Pardon me. Somebody suggested that on over in the summer camp channel on Discord. Created a separate world called Secrets of Carterion, and that's where I'm going to be working on that article. But I left a little placeholder here in the main world just so that I can remember that after summer camp is done, I'm going to take all of the text that's going to basically be, public and available for anybody in World Anvil who wants to see it can see it. As long as I don't tell my playtesters where it is, they're never going to find it. But I'll be able to then take all the bits and pieces from the article and then, chop it up and set up special secrets and all that kind of good stuff. So this was like I said, this was my method of just getting myself organized. And when the new prompts come out, there'll be 10 more here, and eventually there's going to be 33 of these at the top of the page. And hopefully by the end of the month, there's going to be 33 with a nice blue check mark in them. But we'll see how that works. So, my voice is not going to last 2 hours, is it? I guess we're going to have to see what happens there. So anyway, let's get started. And I was thinking that what I want to work on today is my counterculture article. And I noticed that it's using the ethnicity tab, and that made me start to think. I did, go in and start to take a look at the tab. Oh boy, my voice is not going to last, is it? And, I did a quick run through the tab to see what kind of goodies are available in here. And we see, of course, by the way, the other thing I did when I set up all of those stubs was just over down here in the notes section, I added, first of all, what the prompt actually is, and then some ideas that I was doing here. And in fact, I can get rid of this because that's not the one I'm going to do. I'm going to do this one, and we'll get back to that in a second. But I went back and I looked, and what kind of stuff is here, and we see like naming traditions and what kind of names we can use, and that seems to be the main gist of the whole thing, which is interesting. Actually, no, there's a couple other tabs. There's ideals. What do these people consider important? Relationship ideals is interesting because that could be where we play with the counterculture thing. Customs is another big area. Shared values, language groups and dialects, dress code. That's going to be fun, as you'll hear. Culture and cultural heritage is going to be fun, too. There's a lot of places here where we can probably work on the whole counterculture theme. And then connections and relations have a couple of other extra bits here. So anyway, just a quick background. Again, I'm working on an RPG environment, and the rule set that I've kind of planned on for those of you who do play in fantasy role-playing games, I'm working off the Pathfinder open gaming license, mainly because they make so much more available than Wizards of the Coast does. The way they define player characters is first you define what they call an ancestry, which everybody else calls a race, dwarves, humans, that sort of thing. And then underneath that, they define something called a heritage. And it occurred to me that within World Anvil, the species tab is going to be an excellent way to handle things like dwarf or elf or halfling. But the ethnicity tab is going to end up being an excellent way to handle heritage. Because the heritages do indicate where, different branches of dwarves, for example, may have separated out. And in my case, that's exactly the case here. The counterculture that I'm going to be focusing on, as you see, the name is Seafarer Dwarves. What can be more undwarf-like than a dwarf that leaves the mountain and leaves the mines and leaves the forges and decides to make his life on a sailing ship, with a few of his best friends. So I actually have a city in my world where these guys are gonna kind of be focused. Um, so I eventually plan on having whole adventure arcs that deal with these seafarer dwarves, either being one or interacting with them. So that part is gonna be well down the road. But I couldn't resist the part, and in fact, the city that I'm working on here is actually technically just outside of the chosen area that I picked for the bulk of summer camp. But I couldn't resist the opportunity to actually use this to take care of my seafarer dwarves. So, with all of that said, let's get started. Why were my changes saved? Did I hit save changes, or was that an autosave? Did they put an autosave feature in here? Interesting. So, who are the seafarer dwarves? So I'm going to start typing. I'll try to read along because I'm sure any of you, I know I follow some of these streams on phones, and it's impossible to read this stuff on a phone. So not every, a good way to start. Not every dwarf spends his life in the deep cores of the mountains. Some have decided to make their way on the surface, but most of these never stray far from the environment. I'm going to have to do a lot of reworking on this, in which they were first awakened. Awakened is a term I'm using all through my world for being created. Take a quick look at the chat. By the way, I have to keep remembering to do that here too. I see a few hellos. Don't forget to follow me, by the way. I need all the followers I can get. I'm just getting started in this streaming thing. The title is in brackets to separate them out. You mean back in the, was that back in the timeline or on the article list? I'll let you answer that. Okay, not every dwarf spends his life deep in the deep cores of the mountains. Some have decided to make their way on the surface. Most of these never stray far from the environment in which they were first awakened. Dwarves are most comfortable with solid ground. Beneath their feet. But not all dwarves are so. One group has transitioned to a life as alien as any dwarf could imagine. A life at sea. These are the seafarer dwarves. That's a little repetitive, but we'll have to deal with it. These are the seafarer dwarves. And their society is quite unique. Among, and most would say, strange isn't strong enough word here, but I'll go with it for now and go back to it later. For any normal dwarf comprehend. I'm going to come back to this piece in a little bit and see if we can start doing some of the other little odds and ends. I'm not going to play with the name stuff too much. I don't know if I'm going to get to this. I might get to that eventually. But that's not really important stuff for the for what we're dealing with here, I think, in the camp article. So let's start looking at the ideals. I'm actually going to skip those too, but I might come back to them. Let's jump to customs, because I think this is where everything is going to really be. Okay. Customary codes and shared values. Common etiquette, dress code is going to be fun. Art and architecture is going to be fun. Where should we start? Any suggestions? Oh, I can have fun with coming of age rights too. That could be sailing from place to place, a solo or something. Oh, myths and legends. I'm going to have to work something in there. Too bad I have something else chosen for the myth that I'm doing. Major historical figures. I have one of those. You know what? I'm going to make a quick note of that right now. I'm not going to jump into, because it's going to mess up the stream. I'm not going to jump into my the reference article that I have, but I have, just as a quick note, and I'm going to have to get back to this later. Just going to put a note there to remind me. I have one of the constellations in the sky, and in fact, that's going to fit there too. One of the constellations in the sky is actually perceived to be a sailing ship that belongs to one of the first seafarer dwarves. So I'm going to have an opportunity to squeeze them in under historical figure and under myths and legends. So, general view of the culture. Start with the general view of the culture. That's not a bad idea. So that was culture and cultural heritages. Okay, how do we want to describe a culture? Naturally enough, a life of a seafarer dwarf revolves around the sea. From an early age, they learn to live the unique life of a sailor. Remarkably, and these were a few of the ideas that I had already thought about, many of the traits of all dwarven kind are adaptable to this life. A seafarer can, for example, you know what, let's do it this way. Where a deep dwelling dwarf finds it naturally easy to traverse narrow ledges and rock bridges, the seafarer is at home in the rigging of a ship almost from birth. What else do we want to say? Their inherent steadiness of foot gives them remarkable ability to traverse swaying decks in even the stormiest seas. I have visions of these, like a ship being rocked by a typhoon, and all of these dwarves like scampering around the rigging and raising and lowering sails and hopping around, and some non-dwarven passengers that are getting bounced all over the place, and in the meantime, every one of these dwarves is acting like they're on solid land. So I do plan on having a lot of fun with that in the future. All right, so we did a little bit of background there, but let's go into the culture, the true culture. Farers also have the ingrained sense of loyalty to a leader shared by all dwarves. Mutinies on seafarer vessels are really unheard of. A crew is typically chosen from clan members. That's something else that dwarves have inherently in the Pathfinder style rule set is, besides being from a heritage, they're also from a clan. Members, this reinforces loyalties even more. There is one other quality that the seafarers have inherited from their mountain-bound ancestors. The love of shiny things. This desire for wealth. Gold coins, precious gems, finely crafted jewelry, leads some of the seafarers to take up a life that involves liberating such treasures from the holds of other ships. We all know what that means, right? I'm going to go back to that, though, and I'm going to add in here most of the seafarers have a lifestyle based around trade. Their ships are after by merchants of all races, as they are well known as the most valuable and trustworthy bearers of goods from place to place across the oceans of Carterion. And that gives me a chance to move into this. Okay, so, but not every seafarer deserves this trust, as there is one other quality that the seafarers have inherited from their mountain-based ancestors: the love of shiny things. This desire for wealth, gold coins, precious gems, etc., leads some of the seafarers to take up a life that involves liberating such treasures from the holds of other ships. But even here, the dwarven sense of, I need a word here, not family, loyalty, prevents them from raiding ships of their cousin seafarers. Yep, that's exactly it, Kajetan. Yeah, I could have just said they're pirates, but it's a little more fun to to play with the words sometimes. So anyway, but even there, the dwarven sense of loyalty prevents them from raiding the ships of their cousin seafarers. An act of piracy by a farer vessel upon another has never been recorded in history. It sort of makes you wonder why anybody else would even go out on ships, but it's a big world. What else do I want to say? I could argue that that comes into traditions, but let's not. Birth baptismal rites. Okay. Not that they get baptized, but I'm going to put a little bit of common information in here. The seafarers share the concept of clan with all other dwarves. At birth, the family of a new seafarer dwarf begins to craft the ceremonial clan dagger. Oh, and you know what? I'll even do this here, just because everybody needs to remember to do these. That's something that I'll need to do later. The ceremonial clan dagger that will be presented to the infant on its naming day. And we'll capitalize that. Okay, you know what? We're going to even give this a subheading. I'm going to start with 3s. I think that works. I'm going to take a quick look and see what this looks like in a second. Let's see what we got so far. Let's see what this is going to look like. I'm curious to see how all of these things are going to show up anyway. Save changes. And preview. I want another tab because I don't want to keep overwriting this one. So let's see what this is going to look like so far. Yeah, the naming day. I'm thinking of actually having it basically the first birthday, and of course presenting him with the dagger. Oh wow! I don't know about anybody else, but tree and grass pollens kill me. So, all right. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, the vignette shows up top with no title. Then we have a big culture thing. Culture and cultural heritage. Oh, that's interesting. That one is, they lowercase to those. And that's a built-in heading. I'll have to deal with playing with that someday. Birth and baptismal rites. Okay, there's my heading. That's good. That's the right size. I see where common myths and legends and historical figures is another one with a lowercase f. if anybody knows how I can go in and change those titles, um, either that or I'm gonna have to recommend. I'll have to put a suggestion into the into the suggestion box to have some of these titles fixed up with all uppercase. I might be able to play with it by forcing some CSS on it, but I'm not going to kill myself worrying about that. All right, don't have anything in the sidebar yet. That's interesting. I wonder what's going to show up there. This is actually something that actually brings up an interesting point. One of the things that I've found, especially when playing with a new template, is it's worth going in and even though you're gonna, just so if you really care about how your article is going to look, it's worth putting in just a little blurb in each one. And then seeing what the template is, what it actually looks like when it gets presented. Ideals of beauty. That's. I'm going to want to actually get back to that one because that one is going to be interesting for dwarf. I can tell you right now the gender ideals are going to basically be pretty much they don't care whether you're male, female, or anything in between. If you get your job done and you're reliable, then you're trusted. The Pathfinder world kind of stresses that, in today's in today's real world culture, I think that's very important to reinforce as much as possible. Courtship rituals. Relationship stuff. Let's see just how messy this whole thing is going to end up being. Customary codes. Not sure what that means yet. We'll have to think about that. Language groups. The fact that all of these are large text blocks tells me that none of it is going to end up in the sidebar, which is interesting. And again, I'm just putting something in each of these so that they'll show up when I look at it. Another customs area. Is that two? Customs and observed traditions, customary codes, and shared values. I'll have to think about the difference between those. Put my note in there for what that one is. Here's a good question for everybody. How would the seafarer dwarves bury their dead? Do they bury them at sea? Or do they return them to the mountains of their awakening? That'll be fun. Got to have at least one or two taboos. Everybody has a couple of those. Sailing ships, definitely. Can the gnomes provide steam power? Haven't given that much thought. And has the cannon been invented? I'm an old school RPGer that doesn't. I've always shied away from including or introducing gunpowder into my worlds because it can create all kinds of problems. So I'm not sure if there's going to be cannons, but if there's not cannons, there are alchemists who can build all kinds of cool bombs. So catapults on a ship that can launch, fire bombs and things like that would be interesting. Let me do a little catch up here on the chat. Um, Liberating treasures. Yeah, I hope the naming day we talked. Yeah, when the infant. Yeah, in pre-Christian time, the Slavs had a tradition of a first haircut at age 7 to 10. The boy went from the custody of the mother to the custody of the father. Um, I think we definitely need to include a apprenticeship kind of ritual kind of thing at some age. I mean, obviously they don't live their whole lives at sea. They will have cities and towns, where they dock their ships, and where the members of the family who can't or don't actually sail, would live. So yeah, I mean, a young infant would probably not be on the ship. Would be home with mom or whatever until a certain age, and at that age, they become a cabin boy, and then at another age they actually become a sailor and so forth. So I can definitely play with that. Again, it's not necessarily custody of mother or father. We'll have to think about that. I mean, the infants might be raised by grandma and grandpa who are too old to sail, because mom could very likely be captain of the ship herself. Um, yeah, the relationship with the mountain dwarves is another interesting one. Again, all dwarves, the dwarven hierarchy of respect would basically be, at the very, very top is a dwarf in my clan. Next would be a dwarf of my heritage. Next would be a dwarf of any other heritage. Um, Last among those, if you're not a seafarer, though, would probably be the seafarer's, heritage. And then about four notches below that comes everybody else, and humans and halflings and at the bottom of the whole pile, elves, I guess. There's not so much animosity between the races, but that doesn't mean that each race doesn't, look to itself first. So one of the reasons I'm thinking of actually, putting the funeral, the funeral rite or the burial rites back in the mountains is because among all the dwarves, one of the key clans or subsets are dwarves who have dedicated themselves to maintaining the tombs and burial places of their elders, of their ancestors. That's actually a whole subculture of their own. They're going to get their own ethnicity article. So, I mean, I could have, a branch of that ethnicity that's willing to. I don't know, what does it mean though to watch over the graves of people that are buried at sea. So I'm so either if they bury at sea, they're kind of turning their back on their whole ability to find and visit their elders. So I'm thinking of actually, maybe not bringing them back to a mountain dwelling of the old style dwarves, but at least bringing them back for burial on land, where possible. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some that are lost at sea. So, I'm going to have to think about that one a little more. I get the feeling I'm not going to finish this article today, but it's going to get close. So where was I? Yes, I was bouncing through all of these. Did I get through everything? I didn't get to connections and relationships. Major organizations. All right, well, there's going to be a captain's guild. Definitely. Um, I don't know. Do we want common sailors to be organized? I mean, the organizations are really the ship, ship's crews, I guess, would be the main thing. Related locations. Locations where what does this make? Why? Looks like there's something missing in this thing. Um, I do have a city, at least one city where I know they're going to be, but I haven't created that city yet, so I'm going to leave that for the moment. Actually, let's do this. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what the name of the city is. And I'm drawing a complete blank. Let's see if we can find out, because I've got time to kill. Let us save all of this goody stuff. And let's come back over here and refresh this page. All right, now, like I said, I expect to get rid of a lot of these things, but I just want to see what it looks like. Okay, they put the little drop bar underneath naming traditions, culture. There's an awful lot of uncapitalized. And then they throw in some capitals here and there. I'm going to definitely have to talk to somebody about that. All of this stuff is here, and still so far there is nothing in the sidebar. I have a feeling, though, let me see if I can find it this way. I'm going to jump back to my world homepage, and I'm going to jump to my map, and I hope I have the link set up in here. Let's see. Yes, I do. Good. Do I have this town built yet? Built out? I'm getting the little pop-up, but I'm not getting an article for it. So that tells me I haven't done that one yet. All right. Their main city is like just off this map, like right about where the little hand is right now. What did I call it? Oh well. Let's worry about that later. Okay. Let's come back here, and that was in connections and relations, right? Oh, let's just do it this way. Yes, there'll be a geographic location, article title. Seafarer City. We'll just set it up that way for now. And there needs to be more than one of them around the world, obviously, too. But like I said, I have one in mind that's right outside the greater area that I'll do that I'm working on. It'll be the basis for a whole series of adventures. I should say real quick, what my plan is for this whole world is, and in fact, let's take a second and let me save that. Gotta remember to save stuff. If I do a quick jump to my whole world, I'll show all you guys around so you can see what we got here. So here's the world. All right, and I found the nice globe projection. So this is basically an unpeeled globe. It's the best way. It was the best projection I found that doesn't mess up the poles. And because there are land masses that matter at the poles, I didn't want, if you used a rectangular map projection, you get these, huge looking bands of land that really don't exist. This kind of makes it clearer that, that this comes to a, just a narrow bit of land down at the South Pole and up at the North Pole as well. But anyway, this is the whole world. And the area that I'm focusing on is actually this region right around here. The seafarer city that I'm talking about is actually right about there where this hand is right now. Um, and again, I can zoom in on this a little bit. I've got a couple of maps that I'm working off of here. This is that region that I pointed out. We have a major city over here. There will be some seafarers living here as well because this is a major port city. But the city again that's just off the map over here will actually be predominantly seafarer dwarves with a smattering of other races, whereas Endmere over here will be a predominantly human city, although there will be a seafarer um, neighborhood, shall we say, or subset. Most of what I'm dealing with, though, for summer camp is actually in the lower part of this map, which is here. But since I do have players that are already claiming to come from the region out here, where the seafarers are, and from the city out here, I do have to kind of stretch myself a little bit and get into those. But my intention, anyway, is again, since I'm building a role-playing world, I'm focusing on an area. The first area I'm focusing on is for low-level characters, and particularly low-level characters being played by people who are new to the game. Um, I'm actually trying to build my adventures to introduce the rather extensive rule set slowly and carefully. Um, the bugbears head in right in the middle of this map. That's basically the home safe base um, for those new characters. It's yes, I'm using the trope of you meet at the inn. But basically I have my player groups are traveling this road in one direction or the other, but everybody stops at this inn because it's a good week's journey between this inn and those nearest towns. So this is the best place to stop. You know, it's where people gather, but it's also like I said, a place where they can use as a base because lots of fun and interesting things will happen in this area around here. So I'm trying to do most of my summer camp articles related to or focusing on this whole general region. Um, the nearest small towns you can see, like I said, are on this road. The nearest town of any size is just up in the corner here. Um, we have some scary swamp areas to include. We do have an ancient elven enclave that's down here, and that's actually going to figure, believe it or not, in my um, um, common document and title. Um, but we'll possibly see more on that in a future stream. So we'll get into that. So that's the world. Like I said, but anyway, like what I was saying was, I'm focusing on this area for very low level characters, and yes, the swamp is a great place for the apex predator. I'm almost certainly planning on putting it there, and I haven't decided whether to create some special variant on something like a snake or something like a crocodile. I don't want to just grab something out of the existing bestiary documents. I want to create something unique, not just for the camp experience, but also for the player experience. What's interesting though is, I mean, yes, it's going to be an apex predator for the region, but I can't make it so powerful that it'll completely wipe out a low level party of characters if I ever want them to actually meet. Because the long term plan is again to set up to actually create and produce a series of adventures that center around this region, and then once this region is fleshed out, and the characters kind of grow out of it, they'll move on to somewhere adjoining or adjacent and find new adventures, that are more difficult and all that kind of good stuff as they grow and develop in levels. And the second or third area that I plan on hitting is the Seafarer Dwarf area. So, although I'm also toying with the idea of literally just creating that in a vacuum, and not worried about tying it into what my players are doing. The ones that start out in the forest. I might just create a whole new um, subset of adventures for that are sea based for the seafarers. So that's something I have to think about in the future. But anyway, that's how all of this ties into the whole world I'm building. And if I go back to the world itself, oh, you want a link to my world? Sure. There it is. Yes, please come, please look, please follow. Um, I had started putting a lot of this world into Microsoft Word, and then I discovered World Anvil. So I'm still in the process of porting a lot of stuff over, and I kind of stopped when I found out about summer camp because I didn't want to, basically wipe out all my ideas. But you will find that in the Pantheon I've got a bunch of stuff. What I wanted to do was jump back to the world map real quick. The other areas that I've given some thought to. Um, this area right here is where the elves were first created. So it's been 20,000 years, and one major catastrophe. Since they were all created. And by the way, if you go into the Pantheon section, you'll catch a lot of that. I've got a lot of the articles in for that. Um, but the elves have spread certainly to every forest, but not every elf is a forest-based elf, just like not every dwarf is a mountain-based dwarf. So there are elves kind of everywhere, but the predominant amount of them are found in the deep forests. So anywhere you see a big collection of trees here, you can expect that there's an elven enclave in there somewhere. The original dwarves actually come from way over here, but again, they outgrew their original mountain and started spreading out. So there are big mountains. I think there's 12 of them around the world that house major dwarven. I use the term dwarven delves as their main cities. But we're talking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dwarves in each of those delves. But of course, they're also scattered. Again, anywhere there's mountains and anywhere there's stuff to be mined and rock to be lived in, you'll find dwarves. But you'll also again find dwarves in the cities with other races and living in the foothills and all of that sort of thing. Um, Humans first came to be somewhere around this area, and I do have some ideas for basically this whole big chunk is going to be a collection of human predominant kingdoms. Now they had spread much farther than that in the past, but a couple thousand years ago there was a big world war started by the gods, and as these things do, of course, if all the gods start fighting, then so do all of the people that worship them. And lots of population was wiped out, lots of culture was wiped out, all kinds of good stuff like that. Humans that had settled even as far away as this area were all but eliminated, but of course that means that there are still ruins and all that kind of good stuff to explore. It's great hints and tips. How long have I been building this world? Actually, about I would say I first started putting down ideas in December. This is not the first world I've done. It is the first one I've done in World Anvil. I do tend to get very, very carried away. And since I am semi-retired, I have far too much time to do all this stuff. So, like I said, I can talk about a lot of this too because I have in my head where it's going to go. It's not all on paper yet. But hopefully over time, you guys will all get a chance to see it end up on paper. So anyway, like I was saying, there are definitely thousands of year old ruins, like especially around the edges of these forests, where the forests have grown back over them in the time since the I call it the Great Strife, which like I said changed life all around the world. Um, and it's only the last couple hundred years or so that that when I say people, humans, adventurer types are actually starting to move back into this area. So which is why it's called the New Frontier or the Frontier Lands. It's a frontier to the people of the day, but they certainly find signs of ancient occupation wherever they go. Um, so that's the basic world setting. An hour to go, and my voice is failing fast. Let's see how this works. All right, so that's enough. That's enough maps. Let's get back to my seafarers. Uh, so anyway, having looked at that article, yeah, it looks like everything is there, and absolutely nothing is in the sidebars, which is interesting. So I might have to, since they. Let's look at this again. I always do try to think about what is what the article is going to look like ultimately. Obviously. Ooh, I take that back. There is all right. So there's the one thing, yeah, that is going to show up here is where are they? Where are they? But I'm going to end up with this nice long article down the side here, and all of this dead space. So I am going to have to think about what to put in that dead space, and I guess I can find some images, of a sailing ship, and I can fill some of it that way. What I might do is I've done this before. Is if there are a couple of these sections, that are in the template, but contain very very brief entries, historical figures, for example. If I don't want to actually provide detail about who the characters are here and would rather give them separate small articles, then what I'll probably do is blank this out over here and come to this section. Come on. For example, and put a little key value pair in here. We'll just go with the one for now. And that will give me an opportunity to move some of the stuff off out of the main article and put a little balance over here on the side. And of course this would end up being a link to another article. And if you want to learn more about this guy and his ship or whatever, then you click on that link. I might do the same thing with the common myths and legends. Again, instead of spelling them all out here, there is a myth article, so we could use the myth article. And instead of referring to them in the body here, I'll put them over on the sidebar so that they're still there. That's one of the beauties, the flexibility of this whole system. you can use the article templates as they are, but you can also just use them for inspiration, and then with a little bit of work and a little bit of at least either BB code or some very very limited CSS type stuff, you can actually move things around to be a lot more to your liking. So, for example, why is this not scrolling? I'm going to put a couple breaks in here too to give a little room. So I can do something like that, and then I can come back over here, and I think that was under customs. And we get rid of that. And we get rid of that. And we save our work. Hello, tillers. And if we refresh this, so now I've got my historical figures and myths and legends over here. Again, these would eventually be links. And they disappear from this side, so I don't have to worry about that. And again, a lot of these things I'm probably not going to fill in, at least not for now. In fact, maybe that's the next thing I'll do, is go back through these lists and identify the things that I want to deal with, and the ones that really don't apply given the world. Naming traditions. Again, I have an interesting situation with names because, of course, I need to name all of the non-player characters that I plan on putting in the world, but I tend to have much less control over the player character names. So I'm probably not going to include any section on naming. Although I might include, and I would include it, up somewhere else, a section on clan names. But those clan names would actually be more universal across all dwarven kind. Maybe under other names, but I don't want other names to pop up as a header. So I think if we get rid of those, ideals of beauty, I'm not sure about that. Here we can definitely put in something quick. Errors. Oops. Judge the worth of an individual, their abilities, and not by their gender. There have been a number of notable female dwarven shipmasters in the past, are still many today. And I can leave it at that. And that actually gives me a suggestion, that gives me a hint that, again, to reinforce that, I should probably jump back over to my sections section. Love to know why that's not scrolling. And under historical figures, make sure we include one. So where were we again? Deals of Beauty. I think I'm going to skip that. I don't know that I need to get into courtship rituals either. Again, I'm leaving a little note for myself here. The dwarf. But continuing over, so customs, customary codes. Again, I'm not sure what that means, so we can just ignore it. I'm going to leave out languages simply because, again, for game purposes, I have to live with the fact that the dwarves speak Dwarven, and everybody speaks Common. So jumping back to the chat for a minute, because I keep forgetting to go back to it. Going back up a little bit here, the swamp area is a great place for apex predator. Yeah, we talked about that. A platypus with teeth and spines. That's interesting. Killer platypus. Yeah. Can we get a link to your world? Yeah, there it is. How long have I been building? We talked about that. And then Tillers came in, doing all the things, doing them well. I guess I'm all caught up. Excellent. And thank you for the hyping, Tillers. I got to make sure. Am I following you? I have to make sure I am. But I'll worry about that later. Okay, major languages and groups and dialects. By the way, I mentioned at the start of this, this is the first time I have ever streamed anything. And there are one or two improvements that I hope to make before my next stream, which is probably going to be a week from now at this time. Simply because this weekend I have holiday-related plans with family. I do plan on getting some sort of music background around here because I'm sure it's very boring to be listening to nothing except my cracking voice. A little bit of music in the background. I'm going to have to talk to Isaac and find out what she uses for her music background because it's really, really good. So anyway, etiquette should probably include something in here. Again, I'm going to put some notes in here and then maybe jump back to them. There's two categories that might be covered here. Yeah, I can spell today. Etiquette on board the ship and on land. You know, how do they interact when they're not working? In fact, let's do this. Why am I hitting threes all the time? am I doing here? So let's put a couple of headers in there to remind me to come back to this. They're going to be very brief sections, but dress code. Do I want to talk about how our pirate dwarves dress as opposed to maybe our merchant dwarves, or I'm going to leave that there just for a second. Again, art and architecture. This is probably another area, rather than calling it art and architecture and have it heading here. If I were going to do anything with this, I would probably create a ship related section and just tie it off the main article. So I think for here I'm going to drop this. Culture and cultural heritage we've already put a big chunk into. And then we were getting into customs, so maybe we'll come back and finish that in a second. The last thing I wanted to do was, again, under connections and relations, probably want to mention the, I'm going to do these in a different order. H3 Tillers, by the way, thank you for the vote of confidence. And by the way, everybody, stick around. I will be, when I'm done here, which is still another 45 minutes, I will be raiding Heffy, who has his regular daily stream in the slot after mine. Wonder what he's doing today. Wonder if it has, I bet it has something to do with summer camp. So let's cover this a little bit here. When a seafarer signs aboard a ship, it is often for life, or at least until the time they are too old to climb the rigging and pull their weight at sea. Tiller says outfits are important. Actually, dwarves have dark vision, so of course having two eye patches would kind of kill that too. If they were going to, and at least the pirate dwarves, if they were going to wear boots, they'd have to be boots that kind of came right up to their crotch. Your typical hip boots. But hip boots on a dwarf are an interesting thing. Okay, when a seafarer signs aboard ship, it is often for life, or at least until the time they are too old to climb the rigging and pull their weight at sea. I will put a little note at the bottom of that too. A retired sailor is not a retired seafarer. Is not a forgotten one. Though, when a shipmate decides it is time to make the transition back to a life on land, by the way, I've always been a kind of a grammar stickler, and the whole, I've found myself reluctant to make the change that I know is coming in our culture as far as what pronouns to use when referring to male versus female versus you're not sure which one it is. I have found many remarkable ways of ignoring the problem, because I hate using the word they to refer to an individual. That just goes against the 12 years of Catholic school education that I had. So I will often go out of my way to word sentences so that I can use the word they, which I want to do because I don't want to be gender biased, but it still satisfies my sense of grammar that I'm not mixing singular and plurals. So there's a little tip for everybody. Play with your words, and you can usually avoid that situation. When shipmates decided it's time to make the transition back to a life on land, they are still considered to be shipmates. The seafarers even have a word for these folk. Or an expression. For these former companions. They are simply in their berths. And I'm using berth as in sleeping place here. Jumping back up. All right, at least until they're too old to climb the rigging and pull their weight at sea. A seafarer. To be... Oh, I don't want to... What's the word I want to use here? Not rejected. Evicted. That's okay, guys. You're my thesaurus here. To be kicked off, but I don't want to use kicked off. Two points for whoever gets the best. Gives me the best synonym for being kicked off the ship. But I'm going to put kicked off in here now. I like booted. You're first and you win. Yeah. Booted from a crew is the ultimate possible to a seafarer. And one that suffers this fate, often doomed to never be recruited to another crew. At least not one among the seafarers. These often end up crew on vessels by humans. And something else I'm coming to grips with is I hate using the term humans like this. It just sounds strange, but when you have a world that has dwarves and halflings and elves and humans, you gotta, I guess get used to using the word human. I don't like using man, because a the gender thing, and b they're all, I'm using folk when I refer to the collection of all races. Oh yeah, let's. I don't know. Do dwarven boots count as elven shoes? Yeah, or are they as important as elven shoes? These often end up as crew on merchant vessels run by humans. Okay, so that's good for that one, I think. You know what? I like this. I like this sentiment that a retired crew member is not forgotten. They're just considered to be in their berth. And when a seafarer ultimately passes on to the next life, and here we go again, playing with genders and cases. And when these seafarers, these retired seafarers, ultimately pass on to the next life, to their comrades, they are simply in their final berth. No, in their home port. How does that sound? Captain's Guild. Those seafarers enough to have either amassed the funds to purchase or build a ship, or who have inherited one from a family or clan member or make up the what do I want to say here? I want to say, basically, these are the ones that make, they're the captains. Have the opportunity to reach the pinnacle fairer society. They become captains. The captains form just a clan among themselves. though most of the day-to-day business of a is concerned only with one's ship, it is this clan of captains guild that is involved in any activity that requires among ships and crews. That'll probably do. That actually raises something interesting. Is there somewhere that I need to mention the captain as a title? Because the captain isn't necessarily the guy who pilots the ship. He's the guy who owns the ship. He's the ultimate authority. But fortunately, these guys are smart enough to know that if they're not the best pilots or the best navigators, then they can employ somebody who does that better. But I'm going to leave that for now and see if I can figure out a better place to put that. But that should do for that section. Parent ethnicities. There's not a parent ethnicity, but there would be a... See, if I do this, it's going to create an ethnicity, and I don't want this to be an ethnicity. This is ultimately going to get related to a dwarf, probably species article. But I'll leave that out for now, too. Let's see how we're doing here. With a half hour to go, I want to see if I can wrap this up. I would like to be able to finish this and post it before I finish the stream. Let's take a peek at the metadata. I'm sure I'm over 300 words. Come on, metadata. Thank you. 833. Yeah, that's more than 300 words. Cool. All right, so let's see. What else do we want to get to? You know what? I just did a save, right? Let me do it again. Always save. You can't save too often. Let's see what we got here. So seafarer dwarves. All right, we have that little bit at the top. Culture and cultural heritage. We talk about the fact that they live at sea. Sense of loyalty. Lifestyle based around trade. Some of them become pirates. Average technological level. I'm probably going to leave that out. I have to come back in here and do a little bit about shipboard etiquette and etiquette on land. Shipboard etiquette is obvious. It should be pretty obvious. I mean, you listen to your captain, or you listen to your superior. You do what you're told, and you do it when you're told. Again, there's very little argument among shipmates, but there is a lot of loyalty and a lot of looking out for each other and helping each other. Common dress code, yeah, I'm still toying with that. Do I want to go there, guys, or not? Birth and baptismal rites. Oh, I have to go back to the coming of age stuff. Let's get to that next. And we'll clean up funerary and memorial customs. Not sure about taboos, ideals. We have gender ideals. You know what? Clan loyalty kind of gets mentioned in 2 or 3 other places, so I'll probably leave it out of here. Major organizations that's done. Again, these things need to be, I need to go back and find the name of this guy and come up with at least one captain. And then just put stub links to them here. and find the city name. Maybe I'll do those things before we finish. Um, let's jump back in and take care of the rights. They are under customs. Yes, okay. So the seafarers, a clan and the clan dagger that will be presented to the infant on its naming day. Um, let's mention naming day right here. Naming day. For children are not given their names until their, what do we think, guys? First birthday, second birthday, first birthday should be right. That's pretty common. Birthday day. Simply the little ones. Or the tykes. Or some other similar. Oh, what's the word I want here? Affectation. I knew there was a word for that. The mother. Says, do I want this to be a quiet family ceremony, or do I want this to be, like the Lion King style? Behold, all this will be yours someday. Yeah, and yes, definitely the kid. Yeah, the kid is ceremonially presented the dagger here. He doesn't get to actually play with it until he's old enough to be smart enough to deal with it. Dwarven clan daggers, by the way, tend to be big, heavy, ugly things. They're not throwable. And in fact, in game mechanics, one of the interesting things about them, um, the haft of the weapon, or the handle of the dagger, is usually large, heavy, carved, engraved with symbols that denote the clan, and or the sub-clan and the family and all that kind of good stuff. And the handles of these knives get to be so big and heavy that, while they cannot be used in combat as a throwing knife like a normal dagger can, they can be used as bludgeoning weapons. So if you don't want to stab somebody to death, you can beat them over the head with the hilt of your dagger, and knock them out, or just bludgeon them to death, I guess. So yeah, it's definitely not a child's toy. Um, so how do I want to do this? Does the mother of the child announces the name? Obviously, is what I'm getting at here. But do I have her do it in a quiet ceremony, or do I have her step outside and shout it to the world? What do we think, folks? I'm taking a poll here. I know it's going to take a few seconds to catch up. Shipmates only. I like that. Yeah. Yeah, because it's quite likely. That's actually a good point. I could probably go back, and I do need to mention. I mean, there are opportunities to change ships. I mentioned, for example, once you're on a crew, you're on a crew for life. But obviously, if a member of your family rose to captain, became a captain of their own ship, or a member of your clan, you might, out of loyalty, voluntarily, switch ships, and that's respected. That sort of change is definitely respected. Um, so Yeah, shipmates only. I like that. Well, yeah, yeah. The crew for life is as long as you don't, you have to royally screw up to get kicked off a crew, and I do mention that getting kicked off a crew is like the ultimate punishment to a seafarer. Um, Basically, you might advance through the ranks, and again, if you advance through the ranks and get to the opportunity to become a captain on your own, then obviously you would leave the ship you're on, and unless you're inheriting that ship from the former captain. Um, but other than that, once you're on a ship, um, just out of loyalty, you will remain with the captain that signed you on. When you first started. So actually, having almost hereditary crews is actually an interesting idea, and I think I like it. On their first birthday, though, the mother of the child brings the infant to the ship. And this is we're gonna have to put we're gonna have to pick father or mother here, but she or her father or the father. And announces, here is so and so, your future crewmate. The clan dagger, carefully wrapped to prevent an unfortunate injury, is then ceremonially presented to the child. Yeah, no, it's not a forced stay in. Like I said, you can voluntarily leave the ship, but you wouldn't unless you had a another ship that you have some sort of family or whatever loyalty to. Um, it raises an interesting opportunity for interactions among crewmates. What happens if you just don't get along with the crew? Do you leave for quote unquote no good reason, or do you stick it out because that's what seafarers do? Um, and hope you have an opportunity to leave for a good reason, like my cousin just picked up a ship and I'm going to go sail with him. That's an interesting thought, and it might be worth investigating in this article someplace. Okay, so we did clans and the clan dagger. We did naming day under birth and baptismal rites. That'll work for that. Um, Now, under coming of age rites, when a seafarer child. Oh, you know what? We have one more. There's one more important, almost baptismal ritual, and that is sailing day, H3. When a seafarer. Now, dwarves live hundreds of years, so I don't have to do this to a little, I don't have to do this to like a 5-year-old. When a seafarer child attains the age. Oh, you know what? I need to put one other important note in here. Since the ship itself plays an important part in any naming day ceremony. It is traditional for the captain of a ship to make every effort to be in port in time for a child's naming day. It is not always possible, of course. And in these instances, the ceremony is postponed. Now that opens an interesting, what happens if a ship never comes back? Does the kid ever get his name? We could do some fun things with that. We could have the nameless dwarves. We'll just skip that for now, I think. Okay. So when a child attains the age of 10, it how do we want to say this? It is expected to leave land-based home of whomever raising it. And that actually brings up something else that we need to talk about. Again, we talked about it, but I have to put it in the article somewhere. And join the crew of the ship, which it may spend the rest of its life. He's used to the cabin boys of the ship to learn from the crew skills, customs, and behaviors of any good seafarer. They are well treated. I don't want this to look like it's like slave labor or serf labor. And since crew membership is practically hereditary, find themselves among more close family members than they had in their earliest years. Okay. Now we come to coming of age right. When a seafarer child attains the age of 20 or 15, what do we think? 15 or 20? 15. Oh, I gotta vote for 20. Okay, I gotta remember they're long lived. So 20. They have to prove themselves as fledged seafarers. Is by completing a ritual solo journey by sea, a small single-sailed craft. Specifics of this journey vary from port to port, but it always involves the need to navigate beyond the sight of land, as every seafarer is expected able to find their way even in the deep. After completing such a journey, the dwarf is no longer a cabin boy, but is instead a full crew member entitled to all of the abilities and benefits that position carries. There we go. What is the lifespan? Couple hundred years, 300 years. I have to look. Somewhere in the 300 to 400 year range, I believe. Elves are a little more longer lived than dwarves. Um, so if you think about that, if you're if let's say they're 303, let's say it's 350, and let's say I don't know when do you get too old to work, or when do you hit retirement age? Is that at 250? Is that at 300? So are these guys spending literally 300 years on the same ship? That raises some interesting possibilities. A crew doesn't necessarily get tied to a specific ship. That ship may come and go. It may get replaced. It may get upgraded. But the crew remains together. And with such a long lifespan and working lifespan of the members, although certain individuals will be coming and going, every couple of years, there's an awful lot of continuity, and each ship, is going to maintain its own history, and each ship is, the ship's logs, or the captain's logs, are going to be, fascinating multi-year, many-year histories of the escapades of a particular ship. So again, as I start to flesh out this whole society and the adventures and kind of things they can go on, I'm going to have a lot of fun to playing with all of that sort of thing. All right, so that takes care of that. I think we decided, although they live most, if not all, lives at sea, the seafarer. I'm gonna have to think about wrapping this up in a few minutes. Where did the time go? The seafarer dwarf it is desirable for the seafarer dwarf to finally return to the... Here's an interesting question. For those of you who have built worlds with other names, do you use the term Earth to refer to the ground? Or do you find yourselves avoiding using the term Earth because that's not the name of this planet? To finally return to the stability of the earth and stone in which their kind was first awakened. We're going to go back to that awakening thing. Many years ago. Whenever possible, even if death occurs at sea, a seafarer's is returned to port and interned in a stone tomb alongside its ancestors. These tombs are maintained by those of the tomb keeper. And this is, here we go with another ethnicity. Clans for all time. If a seafarer is lost at sea and there is no body to return, that unfortunate's belongings are interred instead. To the family the deceased is present, is resting along with gone on before. How does that sound? Okay, time for another save before I lose this stuff. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I still have a lot of work to do on this article. I'm not going to obviously send it in yet. But what I am going to do, for those of you who are interested in keeping track of it, I'm going to take off the draft. I'm going to leave work in progress. I'm going to hit the save changes one more time. Then I'm going to come over here and refresh this whole mess. And then I'm going to give you guys all a link to the article so that if you want to see how it turns out, feel free to follow that article. I will even jump back in here and click on send notification to your followers that it's been published. And I'll hit a save on that. All right, and that way, like I said, I'll wrap this up during the day today, I'm sure. Um, but it's been a lot of fun, and I would like to thank everybody that stuck around or that joined during the stream. Again, before we leave here, please take a moment to follow me if you haven't already. Again, I'm new to this whole streaming thing, so I need all the followers I can get. And yes, we are definitely rating Heffy. Um, and I guess it's time to do that now. So let's just jump over and see if we can make that happen. Come on. Okay. Let's see if we can make this raid happen. Raid channel. Pick Hefe Live. There he is. He's got 5 people already. And here we go. And again, thank you, everybody. I will be back here again this time next Thursday. I may end up sneaking another one in before that, but if not, I will definitely be here next Thursday. And again, thank you again, and let's all go. Don't forget to tell Hefe to keep that forge lit. 3, 2, 1, raid.